Hello, everybody. This is Cody Bateman. Welcome to a brand new episode of our relationship marketing with Cody B. Super excited, like I always am, for the guest that we have on today. Before I introduce her, I just want to reach out to all of our listeners and share my appreciation to you for who you are as human beings, for seeking to reach out in kindness to others, to make a positive difference and to create genuine connection with other human beings. And I really appreciate that. I really appreciate all of you who make that a conscious effort in your business and in your personal life. It's part of the reason that you tune into this show. I know that, and we just really appreciate you. We have an amazing guest with us today. Her name is Erin Baer, and my goodness, I just want to tell you a little bit about this person. We're going to bring her on here in just a second. Erin is a thriving entrepreneur and lives her passions as an author, speaker, and empowerment coach. She's a survivor of domestic violence and sexual assault. She began telling others her story of grace and grit on her road to recovery. All of this turned into a book titled From Beaten to Badass, which I'm really excited to read. I have a copy of it right here. For all of our folks watching on YouTube, it's got a picture of an elephant on the front of it. And From Beaten to Badass. The powerfully worded personal memoir gives readers the strength, hope, and courage to keep going and become the badass women they were always meant to be. We'll find out from her if that includes men too today. I'm sure it does. So without further ado, let's bring to the stage or bring to the audience, to all of you, the one and only Miss Erin Baer. How you doing today?
I'm fantastic, Cody. Thank you so much for having me today.
Well, we're super excited to have you on, and I love your story, and more importantly, I love your courage. It takes a lot of courage to become public with this kind of an experience. So I kind of want to start there, but before we do that, I want to give you a chance to kind of introduce yourself to our audience. Obviously, we've shared a little bit about your background, but there's some really cool stuff in your upbringing. You're a big golfer. I know you did some things. Just tell us a little bit about your upbringing and where you came from.
Sure. So I'm originally from California. I am a twin. I have a twin sister. And what's interesting is my dad is way older than what my mom was. So my dad was 48 when I was born. My mom was 24. So there was a huge age difference. So growing up, everybody thought my dad was my grandpa. But my parents actually didn't stay together throughout our life. So we were actually, my twin and I were taken from my dad at the age of 2, and we moved around a lot until we settled in Missouri with my twin sister, my mom, and then my stepfather, and then they had a child. And so I stayed with them until about 14 years old, and then they divorced. And that was devastating because I thought, we had a stable upbringing. Even though I was bullied as a child, I had almost a stable environment at home, or something I considered a little more stable than school. And I moved with my mom and my twin sister after the divorce, and I ended up going to 3 different 8th grades and then 4 different high schools because I've been on my own since I was 14 years old.
So you said you moved away from your twin as well?
I did. So at first it was with my twin sister and my mom. We moved to a different town after the divorce.
Right.
And I didn't like it there, and I wanted to move with my dad. So I went and lived with my dad, and it wasn't great there either. I felt very alone and unwanted, not by my father necessarily, but just by friends and people around me. And so I tried to move back with my mom, and basically I've been on my own since I was 14, and I basically supported my entire family. I worked several different jobs. I went to high school. I had to be an A student. I was a golfer, number 1 on the high school teams. But I went to 4 different high schools and 3 different 8th grades. And so from that moment of 14 years old, I had to just kind of figure it out. I had to figure out what life was, and adulting became very clear at 14 years old.
So here's the reason I'm asking this. My wife is a twin.
Oh.
So I've got some experience in living with a twin, and there's really interesting dynamics of being a twin.
Yes, there is.
So we might kind of talk about that just a little bit today in terms of your whole life experience. So I'm going to ask you a couple questions about that. So you were together with your twin sister. Are you identical or
We're fraternal, actually.
fraternal?
So,
Yes. So
yeah,
my wife's name is Jody. She's fraternal as well. Jody and Julie, and they've been very close their whole lives. Um, so it's this to me, this is very interesting dynamic. So you were with your twin sister until you were 14,
until I was 14, yes. And
and
so
then
my
there was
mother,
separation.
there was no separation until we were 14 years old. And so my sister, my twin sister, she was liked by everybody. She was, the track star. She could run a mile under 5 minutes. She, was popular and everybody loved her. And then there was me who was bullied and teased and kind of was really introverted as a child because I was afraid to speak up or say anything because I was a golfer and golf was really frowned upon and people didn't understand the game. And it also was the sport my dad taught me. And so it was what really kind of divided my mother and I. And um, I just, I didn't like the dynamics in the household between my twin sister, my mother, and myself. And so I decided if I wasn't going to be wanted in this household and my twin sister and her friends really didn't want to pay attention to me, then I should just go to California, live with my dad and start anew. And so that's what I did. And my mom sent me on the next plane the very next day. And I lived with my dad for over a year and a half in California.
Wow, interesting. Very, very interesting. So you went through some crazy experiences for sure. A lot of hardship, a lot of trial and tribulation in your life early on. It looks like, and you've certainly flipped those experiences into something that's very beneficial and positive to other women and other people in general. So, um, talk to us a little bit. I might come back to the twin thing in just a second, but I want you to kind of move on and just talk a little bit about this book that's coming out is From Beaten to Badass, and of course obviously it gets into your experience um, of being abused to being a badass, and I
Yes.
love that theme. In fact, you wrote a little comment to me which I considered a huge compliment. You wrote a personal note to me in your book as a gift to me. Thank you for listening, Cody. Thank you for listening to your prompting and creating sent out cards. I'm so glad to be a part of a company that is all about love, kindness, and encouragement. You're truly a badass. I want you to know that's a huge compliment to me. I really appreciate coming from you. I really, really took that to heart and really appreciated that. So, what does it mean to be a badass?
I explain it with one simple phrase. You are not defined by your circumstances. You are a badass. You just have to get back up. And I really, truly believe that we are all badasses at heart. It's not the badass that, puts people down or turns a nose or a blind eye. It's the people that stand up and they face fear head on and they say, you know what, I might be knocked down and I might get bruised or scraped or a little bloody, but I can get back up and I can, you know, be the victor in my own life. I don't have to live in this victim mentality. I don't have to let my circumstances define me. And, I think a lot of people, and I used to be someone who just thought I had bad luck and I thought I just got the short end of the stick. And I thought that that's all, life had for me. Yeah, I thought, I wasn't good enough because I was taught that I wasn't good enough until one day I said, wait a minute, just hold on. Why am I listening to those people that are giving me bad seeds? Why am I nurturing those? And why do I need to be defined by all of this beaten down stuff? Why can't I rise above it and make the life I want to make? And, I've had a lot of hardships in my life, not just 10 years ago in the abuse, but I went to 4 different high schools. I was bullied. I was threatened. I was teased and tormented. My mom abandoned me several times. Just a lot of horrific things happened to me. And when I would tell my story to people, people would always ask, well, why didn't you just give up? Or why didn't you do drugs or alcohol? And I said, why would I do that? Like, it was never a choice to me. There was never two choices of either failing or surviving. It was always survival. Like, I'm the only one who can pick myself up. Nobody's going to come and save me. I need to be my own hero. And that's what I did. I just figured it out. I didn't have anybody to fall back on. I didn't have anybody to lend a hand. I just, by the grace of God, because I'm a true, Christian and believer in God. I just know that he had something better for me, and he would not have put me through all of these battles if it wasn't supposed to lead to something. I don't want people to think, that all the battles I fought, and some maybe I lost in the eyes of others, were done in vain. I want them to mean something. I want there to be purpose behind it.
So let me ask you, statistically, most people who go through bad experiences like this choose the other route, unfortunately. Statistically, most people, they give up. They put up the white flag. They do succumb to drugs, alcohol, whatever kind of escape they can get. Statistically, the majority of people in the world go that other way. So there was something in your life that gave you the strength to make the right decisions. What was that?
It was all the people that God put in my path. And so if you were to go through my book, and when you read it, and I know you will, you'll learn about all the people that God put in my life. So chapter 1 is laying down the foundation. It talks about my adolescent years. And I talk about my mom. I talk about my dad and my second grade teacher, and these people that taught me one specific lesson. And that lesson became a quality that I possess today that have helped me go through the trials and tribulations of my ups and downs. So my mom taught me acceptance, whether it was self-acceptance or acceptance of others, because she necessarily didn't accept me for who I was. So she taught me that I needed to accept myself so others would eventually accept me. My dad taught me strength. My second grade teacher, who saw me on the first day of kindergarten, she was like, I'm going to have you in my class. And she taught me faith. So she showed me who God was. And then I had golf mentors that I talk about in my second chapter. And they just, really put golf as a forefront for me. It was my consistent rock that existed throughout my life. And, I really look at golf as alignment with life. And, if you hit a shot and it goes left and you're in a bunker, that's not the greatest shot, but you can get out of it and you can recover and you can keep going and you can get to, your destination or the goal that you may have. And so it was all the people that God put in my life, whether they were good or bad, taught me a very valuable lesson, and to hold on to that. Because when you read my story, it's all the lessons people taught me. And then at the very end, I think every single one of them, whether they were good, whether they were bad, whether there was something I would have rather not gone through, but I wouldn't be the badass I am today. I wouldn't be my own hero, and I wouldn't be able to speak up and empower others if I didn't go through that course of life.
So good people that took an interest in you early on.
Mm-hmm.
You mentioned teachers, parents, friends who took an interest in you early on. And by the way, that's a message for this show. That's what this show is all about, is taking an interest in other people. You never know what anybody's going through. You don't know if somebody's beaten right now or if they are a badass. In fact, sometimes people that act like they're badass are actually beaten to the core. And so it really comes down to, it's really important that we treat every single human being that we come into contact with as someone who may need help, somebody that may need encouragement. And and you saw that in people. So good people was one thing, and sports was one thing. You probably have a lot of golf metaphors.
I do.
Yeah. So, and I noticed that as I interview people, there's some commonality there. It's people who are, sports is a big deal with people growing up, and there's a lot of other things too. It's positive extracurricular activity that I believe is so important in kids growing up. It doesn't have to be sports. It could be a myriad of things, that they're interested in, that they have to create discipline in order to do. To be a golfer, you have to be disciplined and you have to learn stuff and you have to overcome adversity. So sports, I think, is a great tool, right? I mean,
Yes, I mean, I totally agree, because I knew that I wanted to go to college. It was never not an option. College was definitely something I wanted to do. It was a way for me to see it as a new beginning, especially after going to 4 different high schools, a different one every year in different states. I knew I wanted some consistency, and golf was the one thing that was consistent for me. And my goal as a little girl was I was going to get a golf scholarship to go to college, because if not, I wouldn't have been able to afford it, first of all. And second, it was my passion. It's the first love of my life. Golf is the first love of my life. It was the one thing that never let me down. It was the thing I could go to clear my head or feel important or good enough, because I was phenomenal at golf, and I feel like I'm an amazing golfer. I'm not trying to brag or have a big ego, but just golf, I'm natural at it. It's the one thing that was consistent. And I think if you have something that you can put your heart and soul into, you're always going to make good decisions, and you're always going to want to do the best for yourself.
So today you're going out and helping a lot of women in particular. You do workshops and different events and things to help particularly women out who may have gone through, a similar experience to you, and you take people from beaten to badass. And I guess my question is, you said with confidence that you were natural. You were always natural at golf. When you go to work with someone who's beaten down, don't you find sometimes that people have not found what they're natural at? What do you say to those people? They don't think they're good at anything. They haven't found anything that they particularly like or that they're good at, or at least they say that. I'm sure you run into that. I mean, what do you say to people like that?
I just ask them simple questions, and I first tell them, first of all, we have to change your mindset and the language that you're speaking to yourself, because the language you speak to yourself, you're manifesting within your own world. Whether or not somebody else told you that at a young age or at a different time in your life, we need to go ahead and we need to stop that negative language, because it's not serving you or doing you any good. And then from there, I just ask them simple questions, and I let them know what I see in them or the potential I see in them. Listening is truly the real thing that you have to do when it comes to those that are abused or beaten down in the realm that I work in, because people don't listen to them. They feel ignored or misunderstood or judged or ashamed, or they feel guilty. And so that's when they don't speak up. So I really encourage them to find their voice. And when they're like, I just can't, I'm not a badass, I'll never be good enough. And with all the negativity, I tell them, well, I want you to borrow the strength I have in you. I want you to borrow the courage I have for you. And I want you to borrow my hope in my voice. And until you can find your own, that's what you need to do. Borrow mine, because somebody gave me their strength. Somebody believed in me when I was going through that period of my life. And if I wouldn't have had that, I would never have found my own. So I think it's just really letting them borrow our strength that we have, that we can offer them, so they can see that others believe in them.
One of the things I've noticed, we do these Promptings Academy events, and I've done them for years, mostly live. We did our first virtual one back in April, and I think you attended that, right?
I did. The very next day that I joined.
Yeah, that's great. But one thing I noticed, and we've done a lot of them, so I've got a lot of experience doing the interactive part, because I do a lot of interactive stuff with the audience, with specific people in the audience. We coach them on their affirmations and the stories that they create in their mind and whatnot. And I've noticed over the years that a lot of people that gain the courage to stand up and share, they are beaten, they are broken down, and they desperately want a solution, and they find the courage to stand up and share. And one of the things that I've noticed over the years is that if you do ask good questions and you listen intently, you can discover qualities in someone in minutes. In fact, I think a lot of times a stranger that's tuned in to asking the right questions and really listening to somebody they don't particularly know can pick up on skills, qualities, talents, abilities in somebody. And over the years, I kind of was able to experience that as a facilitator of these events. You do events where you bring beaten to badass people from beaten to badass. Do you find that in listening, in asking the right questions and listening intently, that you really can pull out qualities that people have that they don't know they have? Do you see that?
I do. I see that all the time. When I have conversations, with those that have just left an abusive situation or are struggling with something in their life, and they're just trying to figure out where their next door is, like where, they feel like they're shut down and they're in the dark, and they're just looking for a little bit of light in their life so they can get permission, where they don't really need permission, but they need to feel like they've received it from someone that they can trust. That's when they start to open up, and that's when you start to listen to them, and that's when you can even just give them a look, a specific, like, hey, I've got you, like, don't miss this opportunity to speak up. And that's when they finally, you can see basically truly in front of you, you can see the walls crumble or the wall to start to come down, and they're like, oh, I'm in a safe space. I can open up just a little bit, and maybe that'll be the door that I've been looking for. And it's really powerful, because once that door opens, once you see them kind of let their guard down, you really want to nurture that. Because if you don't nurture that, it's going to be put right back up, and they're going to be, even more closed off from the growth that they can, have and keep becoming, like the growth on the way to being a badass. Because badass doesn't happen overnight. Like I said, I think we truly have the badass in us, but how far down have we shoved it?
Yeah, interesting. We are listening to Erin Baer. She's the author of the book titled From Beaten to Badass. You can find information about her at beatentobadass.com. And she's got information on there about, what she does to help people to better their lives and whatnot. So Erin, on the front of your book, you have a picture of an elephant.
I do.
Talk to us about what's the elephant all about?
So first of all, elephants are my favorite animal. I just find them so majestic. They're massive, but they're gentle. They don't forget. They remember everything, but they forgive. And they just truly want to be a part of a family. They're herd animals, and they just, they're empathetic. They're just amazing creatures. And so when I was writing my book last year, I knew that I needed it to represent who I was, and the elephant represents who I am, because I just feel a connection with the elephant, and I hope to one day be as majestic as they are. They never forget the past. They live in the present, but they look for the future. And that's what I try to do every single day of my life. And I just think that they're really, truly powerful animals. And you can tell a lot by the face of an elephant, just as you can tell a lot by the face of a person. And I think I just have a connection with them. I really, truly love them.
So you've spent time with elephants.
No, actually, I have not. I've ridden an elephant once, and I have liked elephants as long as I've been a golfer, believe it or not. So they've been my favorite animal since I was 2. I really liked them, and I think I really fell in love with them because nobody wanted them, and nobody wanted me. Nobody thought I was anything but a scrawny little ugly girl, and people think elephants are weird looking and nobody likes them. And I just found a bond and a common theme with them, and they're all over my house, and I had to have it on my book cover. I just had to.
It's interesting. My daughter and her husband, a couple of years ago, they took a trip to Thailand and spent a bunch of time with elephants. And my daughter had a real connection with them. She's a natural empath. Like, she picks up on unbelievable. She's so gifted as an empath, picks up on energies of people and animals, and just energies of all types, even, plants and crystals, you name it. I mean, she's amazing. But she really picked up on the energy of elephants when she was on this trip. And, she brought back these little elephants for everybody. And so it's very intriguing for me to hear your connection with elephants. I think that's really, really cool. So, it's interesting. Early in the show, you talked about your twin being the popular one, and she was the put together, and everybody loved her, and she was the extrovert, you were the introvert. People loved her, people picked on you. When we see you, my first impression when you were telling that story is that when you were talking about your sister, you were actually describing yourself.
Well,
That's
I
the
am that person now. Yeah, I am
Yeah,
that
yeah.
person
Okay,
now.
so certainly you are that person now. Uh, obviously very well put together, charismatic. You've got the gift, you've got the mojo, you've got it all. How did that? And again, I know that's part of your story of going from beaten to badass, but like you really have it together. People watching on YouTube can I think it helps sometimes to not only hear somebody but actually be able to see you, because there's an energy that you portray that's very, very powerful. um how'd you get there? I mean, you talk about being a 14, in your youth, like you were, you know just life was horrible every day and you were the picked on kid, to what you are now. I mean, wow. Like what is that transformation?
I truly found who I was on the golf course. It really goes back to golf being my rock, my foundation within my life. Because every summer I'd go back and see my father, and my sister would come along, and she wasn't the golfer. She didn't like it. She didn't understand it, and that's when I became the popular one at the golf course with all these old men sitting around having a beer, and I was my dad's little angel. I was his little princess, and I got attention from all these great mentors, and I just soaked it up. And I really felt like I could truly let myself be who I was always meant to be on the golf course and around all of the men's club. And I mean, I had my first job at a golf course. And so every summer was kind of like my real life story. And then every time I went back to Missouri, it was like my nightmare. And so I would just hold on, through the school year for those 9 months, because I knew what was coming. I knew it was at the end of every school year. It was golf, and it was California, and it was my dad, because it was just me and my dad against the world, and nobody could stop us. Like, my dad is my best friend, and he was my hero growing up. And I wanted to really make him proud. If I was going to make anybody proud, it was going to be my dad.
So you close with your sister today?
We are a lot better. We've had our ups and downs, obviously, through the years. And, I had to move away from my family when I was 24, 25 is when I came out to Colorado. So about 10 years ago, that would be a lot longer than that, 12 years ago. I had to get away in order to spread my wings and fly, because I was so crushed around my family. And it's not that I didn't love them, but I was supporting them. I was constantly feeling like I had to do something to earn their love or buy their love or something. And I knew that I was never going to survive within that environment if I didn't leave. And in order for me to truly blossom into the flower, or the person, or the badass that I was meant to be, I knew I had to leave it behind. And then I knew that those relationships would then begin to nurture, because I was my own person. I didn't have to feel judged or compared, that I could never live up to the expectations that were put on me by others, and the expectations I put on myself to be somebody for them.
Interesting. So are you close with your mother?
So that's an interesting relationship. My mom and I, we've gone back and forth, and what I had to do with my mother is I had to really set a boundary. Whether I told her what that boundary was or not, I had to set a boundary within my own heart and in my own mind, and be like, if she crosses this, then I need to back off a little bit. I need to let her be. I need to not get so consumed in trying to make it right or fix it, because my mom is mentally ill. She's had a horrible upbringing, and I'll never understand what she's gone through, because it's something she doesn't talk about. She doesn't have the bravery or the courage to speak about it, because she, was in a different generation. She was different times, those things were hidden. So I don't know her true story. I don't know what that is. But when you read my book, you'll see how our relationship has progressed, and where I could forgive her, because she did a lot of horrible things. But I got to a point when I was writing my book that I was like, you know what? Holding on to this, or not letting it go, or not thanking her for what she did in the best way that she could do it with what she had as a mother, is only harming me. So I need to forgive her. I need to let her go. And I need to let her know that I love her. You know, there may be times I don't like her, but I will always love her because she, one, brought me into this world, and two, she taught me a very valuable lesson. And I learned that her lesson that she taught me became her greatest lesson for herself.
So I don't mean to get too personal asking these personal questions, but there is a reason for it. You know, I've learned as a person that interviews others to just simply act on my promptings during the interview. And so I just try to follow that as much as I can. And the reason that I'm asking you these questions is because, you know, I'm building up to something that I think it's really, really important for a lot of our listeners to learn about. And that is boundaries and how, you know, because a lot of times in your life, because you've mentioned that you were subject to environments that were not conducive to where you wanted to go. And the only way to fix that, which by the way is a major issue in most people's lives, we're in certain environments. It could be family, it could be the friend environment, it could be the neighborhood we live in, it could be the club we go to, the church we go to, whatever. There's typically there's certain types of environments that we are in that may be holding us back from who we really are. And the only way to break out of that is to either make a separation, which a lot of times is nearly impossible to do, especially when it involves family, or to set stringent boundaries and place expectation. You have conveyed that you've done that.
I
Now there's a
have.
lot of, yeah. So there's a lot of our listeners right now, and I'm sure a lot of people that you work with who haven't done that. They are in toxic environments. They have not made separation. They have not set boundaries. When they try to set boundaries, what's the first thing that happens when you try to set a boundary with a loved one? I mean, the first thing that happens typically when you try to set a boundary, or I don't like to use the word try, when you pursue setting a boundary with a loved one, typically there's an immediate pushback. Like it's a lot of times not pleasant. They don't want you to do that, you know? And so how do you coach people through that? Because it's not easy. Some people don't feel like they can ever do it.
It's not easy. And so for me, I learned about boundaries at a very young age because when my mother actually disowned me at 17, I felt rejected. I'd been rejected my whole life. And I felt rejected. And so I learned from my father, like, if someone's going to cut you off, then, you know, it's their loss. And it was my mom. I mean, who wants to be cut off from their mom, the one person that brought them into the world, who they, you know, want to please, and they want unconditional love, and they want acceptance. And she disowned me right before I was going to school. And it was a boundary I didn't understand, but it was a boundary she put in place, but she kept crossing the boundary. So she kept breaking her own boundary. And I finally was like, no, this isn't okay. You set this boundary and I'm going to uphold you to it. Like, you need to respect your own boundary. Like, I can't let my heart, you know, be broken over and over and over again because you set a boundary and then you cross that boundary and then you set it again and you cross that. And I keep getting my heart broken. So my mom's the one who really taught me that, like, once you set a boundary, like, you need to really check yourself and not break it unless it's a conversation that you have with that person. Say, look, I set this boundary. You need to respect it. And if you can't respect it, then maybe the relationship or the ties need to be cut. And so I think starting off with the people that don't know how to set boundaries, you just start small. It might be like, I'm not going, you know, if it's somebody that's dealing with weight loss, I'm not just going to eat whatever I see in sight, or I'm not going to allow myself to go to fast food restaurants 3 times a day. You know, small boundaries that they can actually be successful at. You know, with abuse, because I talk about abuse in my book, if they're in an abusive situation and they're not ready to leave yet, setting that boundary and saying, look, if you talk this way to me, I'm going to leave the room until you've calmed down and we can have a conversation about this without you yelling, putting me down, emotionally or mentally abusing me. You know, women, and I'm sure men out there too, because men are abused as well, but women, and I said it myself. I said, I could never find myself in an abusive situation. I would never let a man hit me. I would never be raped, right? Those are things that we hope never happens to anybody, but they do. And it's detrimental because I found myself in an abusive situation and then I got out of it, right, with one of my boyfriends. And then I was in a more abusive relationship, and it was constantly getting that boundary pushed, but I was constantly going, okay, well, if he doesn't do this, then it's okay. So I really think checking our boundaries is really critical and really important, because I ended up getting an abusive relationship after abusive relationship until 2008, when I moved out here to Colorado. I found an adult relationship. I was like, oh, maybe this person loves me. Maybe they care for me. I'm finally free from my family. And that man, that monster, pushed every single boundary without me even realizing it until I was beaten on a weekly, if not daily basis. I was mentally abused. I was financially abused. I was emotionally abused. I was isolated from my family. Even though I had moved away, I was isolated from contacting them, visiting them. And then I was raped. I was sexually abused. So every boundary got pushed. And I think checking our boundaries, whether we need to write them down, setting them small, or finding an accountability partner that you trust, like a really good friend or a family member, and saying, if you see these signs of me breaking my own boundaries that I have set, and I want you to hold me accountable to, I need you to have a hard and tough conversation with me, because it's important that I stay to these boundaries. And I think a lot of people just think, if I let this boundary go up just a little bit, it'll be okay, because I'm not going to let it go past this level. And then it does get pushed, and it gets pushed. And then we find ourselves where we can't recognize ourselves.
So why do people allow boundaries to get violated? I mean, a lot of times I hear that the nicer you are, the more you have a tendency to have boundaries crossed on you, because you're just trying to be nice. And so I hear that a lot. But what's your thoughts on that? Why do people allow it to happen?
Because they want to be loved and they want to be accepted, and they don't want to hurt anybody's feelings. Everybody wants to be loved and liked and appreciated. And they feel, if I just give in a little bit, then maybe they'll love me more. Maybe I'll be enough for them if I just do this. If I just allow this, maybe I'll finally be good enough. And it's something I did. I thought I wasn't good enough. I mean, it goes to a story when I was 10 years old for Christmas. You know, my mom always told me, you know, you need to make your gifts, you know, they're more appreciative. It shows love and time and compassion into your gifts. They're better than anything that anybody can make. And I was like, oh, great. So do you remember those dancing flowers in the 90s? Or
Yeah.
okay. So I had a dancing flower. It was purple, had sunglasses and a little guitar. I loved it. It just made me happy. It was simple, but it made me happy. And then my mom loved Coca-Cola. And I was like, what if I take these two things and I put them together and I call it the Can Man? And so I did. I got a Coca-Cola can. I tore my little dancing flower apart, glued the sunglasses and the guitar, and I made this really cute Can Man that I adored, wrapped it up. And on Christmas morning, I handed it to my mom, and she unwrapped it carefully. She was all excited, and she took the Can Man out. She looked at it, then she looked at me, and she said this was the worst gift I had ever received,
Oh,
and she
no.
threw it in the trash. And so from that moment, the seed of not being good enough was planted. So anything that fed that and nurtured that seed of not being good enough, I allowed.
So boy, we could talk all day long. I'm telling you, this is crazy. It's just I'm connecting with at so many levels of what you're saying. It's interesting that you were able to go back to the specific story where you instantly learned, well, not learned, you instantly drew the conclusion that you weren't good enough.
Mhm.
Now, when you go to counseling, typically when someone goes to counseling to try to kind of figure out how they process things, typically a counselor will try to take you to those places. They'll try to take you to those trigger points in your life where that experience triggered you to not feel good enough. And what you learn is, and you may have not even known this, but after that experience, numerous times in your life, when you didn't feel good enough, it actually triggered the exact same emotion on that Christmas morn.
It did.
But here's my question, because a lot of people suppress that memory. They don't remember what happened until the counselor brings it out of them. I've been through this experience with a counselor where they brought experiences like that out of my memory so that I could properly deal with it. So did you ever suppress that memory? Did you always know it? Was it always a conscious thing? Did you know that that's the reason you didn't feel like enough?
So I've always remembered that Christmas, that can man, because I was so proud of that gift that I
Yeah,
made. I was so proud. I thought she would love it. And I never made anything after that again. They're like, why don't you make a gift? I'm like, no,
yeah,
no, because it won't be good enough. And so I'd only, paint when I had to paint or create when I had to create for school. But I never wanted to make something original because I knew that it probably would be thrown in the trash. And I didn't ever want to feel that pain again. And I talk about it in my book. And
yeah.
that lesson, that can man lesson, my mom, wrote to me a few years ago, and it might have been 5 or 6 years ago by now, but she actually told me that that was her greatest life lesson, and she's reminded of that every single day
Wow.
because it taught her that you just need to show love over how much time something took. You need to see the love and the commitment to it. And so it was a very powerful, you know, moment in both of our lives, but I didn't know it was such a powerful moment in her life until we actually decided to bring it back up and talk about it. And so my mom taught me a lot of different lessons. And so I'm very thankful for that. But I mean, I've gone through counseling, and there's things when I was writing my book, I was going through therapy because I was like, there's going to be some tough things that I need to talk about, and I don't know how I'm going to handle it.
Yeah.
And, my book only took 5 months to write, but I did a lot of growth in that period because it was very cathartic. And I realized where my need to have control over things were, or my need to set boundaries, or my need to feel enough. I always say to people when they say, well, I'm not good enough, I say, well, no, you're not good enough. Nobody's good enough because you're enough just the way you are. And that's really what I want to express to those that are impacted by domestic violence and sexual assault, because it was something done to them. It wasn't something that they asked for. It was a crime committed to them. And I have this whole mission of make an impact where I give people the opportunity to be the light in someone's darkness and say, your circumstances don't define you. You might have had all these seeds that were planted and this crime committed to you, and you might feel like you're defined by it, but you can actually make the choice, and you don't have to feel beaten down. And I know you can't see that light in the darkness, but all of these people that have sponsored books, that have gone to shelters, they see the true strength and the courage within you, and they see that you're a badass, and they're just shining a little bit of light so you can borrow that strength and that hope and that courage. Because I think us as humans, and I know that you say this all the time, which I love, we're a human race. We don't need to be divided. We're all one human race. And I think coming together and letting others borrow our strength or have commonality within our stories really brings us together, and it shows that we're more common than different. We may have our differences, but we have a lot more in common than we do
Yeah.
that separate us.
We are listening to the very gifted and talented Erin Baer, who has an amazing story to share and is doing incredible things to help people become better in their lives. And we just appreciate so much having you on our show today. Keep in mind, go get her book, From Beaten to Badass. I'm assuming you can get that on Amazon, or where can we get a copy?
You can actually get a signed copy from me on my website, beatentobadass.com. And I really encourage people to do that because I actually donate a portion of the proceeds back to those impacted by domestic violence and sexual assault. And I have a campaign where people can sponsor the book, and I send it to a shelter in their name. And yeah, it's
So I'm going to put
cool.
it up here again for those on YouTube. From Beaten to Badass, you go to beatentobadass.com. Order the book. Proceeds from it go to domestic violence and different things. Encourage you to get a copy of this. I cannot wait to get through this. In fact, when I get through it, I'm going to bring you back on. I think I need to read this book and then bring you back on from a different perspective as far as interviewing you, because I think that you have a wealth of information, and I want you to stay close to your phone because I have some ideas. We have an up and coming relationship marketing grand summit. It's a virtual event this year. We have over 30 speakers and panelists that are going to be sharing topics, different topics on the subject of relationships and relationship marketing. I have some ideas for you at that event, and stay tuned because I need to formulate them a little more before I ask you. But I am going to ask you to participate in that event, just so be ready for that.
Okay. I was planning on attending regardless. So
I'm going to ask you to participate as a teacher. I'm not 100% sure the format yet, but we're going to try to, I've got some ideas that I want to play around with, and I'll get back with you on that. So you're going to hear more from Erin at the RMGS in some capacity. So that's if you say yes.
oh, absolutely. I will be honored. I'm about to like cry tears of joy because that would be amazing.
You have an incredible message, and God has put a gift in you, young lady. God has put a gift in you. The ability, not only gave you the experiences that he needed you to have, but he also gave you gifts that are really going to help you to change people's lives. And I can see that gift come out of you loud and clear, and it's just amazing. You have an incredible energy about you. I know that you're a Christian woman, and you give, all the glory to God, and that's why I'm speaking to you from that place. I'm the same way. God has certainly given you gifts and expects you to do things with them. So if I can put you in a place to do that, I'm going to do it. So
I would be very humbly blessed.
all right. Well, there you go. Erin Baer, thank you so much for being on our podcast today. I appreciate all that you do. And thank you all for tuning in, and just keep on doing it. Every week we do another one of these. So look forward to having you all back again. Thanks, everybody. Take care. We'll see you next week.
Thank you.
Enjoyed this episode of the Relationship Marketing Podcast with Cody B, be sure to subscribe to the show and leave a review so that together we can get this message, The Power of Human Connection, out to the world. You can find Cody's new book, The Power of Human Connection, on Amazon or the Send Out Cards gift store.